The better you get at budgeting, the easier it becomes to survive being underpaid. That's the trap. You think you're fixing the problem, but you might be adapting to it instead. It starts as something responsible, smart, necessary. You look at your spending more carefully. You cut unnecessary purchases. You optimize bills. You compare prices. You become more intentional. That feels productive, like you're taking control. And in a way, you are. The pressure decreases slightly. The panic becomes more manageable. You stop wasting money on things that don't matter. You become more efficient with what you have. That feels like progress. You build systems, budgets, rules, limits. You track expenses more carefully. You learn how to stretch things further, how to make less feel manageable. And every improvement reinforces the behavior. You feel more disciplined, more stable, more responsible. That's the routine. Adjust, cut back, optimize, repeat. Nothing about it feels wrong. It feels mature, like you're finally handling money correctly. This is the part that feels productive. It feels like the problem is spending. That's the belief holding everything together. If you can manage money better, the pressure should decrease. If you can optimize enough, organize enough, cut enough, things should finally stabilize. That feels logical, responsible. You're not avoiding reality. You're confronting it directly. You're learning discipline, delayed gratification, control. That's what budgeting represents, a way to regain stability without needing more. And because the improvements are real, the belief gets reinforced. You stop overdrafting. You waste less. You become more careful, more strategic. You feel less chaotic. That matters. It feels like progress because part of it is. But over time, the focus starts narrowing. You stop asking why things feel tight in the first place and start asking how much more you can compress. What else can be removed? What else can be delayed? What else can be tolerated?
And because budgeting gives you small wins, it keeps the system emotionally sustainable. You adapt to the pressure instead of escaping it. That's the belief. If you can just optimize better, endure better, organize better, eventually things will work. So you keep refining survival instead of changing conditions. And because it feels responsible, the pattern becomes difficult to question. The system benefits when pressure becomes manageable, not removed. Managed. That's the alignment. The more efficiently you absorb rising costs, the less resistance the system encounters. Budgeting helps you survive instability without forcing instability to change. So the pressure stays in place while your tolerance increases. That's why the behavior gets rewarded socially. Being good with money often means being good at absorbing limitations quietly, stretching income further, accepting less, delaying more. You become adaptable, flexible, resilient. And those traits sound positive because individually they are, but structurally they create something else. A person who can function under shrinking conditions. That's the alignment. The better you become at compression, the longer compression can continue. And because budgeting creates measurable improvements, it feels like forward movement. Lower spending, fewer mistakes, more control. But those improvements happen inside the same financial conditions. The environment stays the same while your ability to tolerate it improves. So your attention moves toward management instead of expansion, toward maintaining stability instead of increasing leverage. That's the shift. You don't solve scarcity. You become more efficient at functioning inside it. Budgeting gives you control, but control can become containment. That's the trade-off. The more carefully you organize limited resources, the easier it becomes to normalize limitation itself. You learn how to make things fit, how to reduce pressure without removing the source of it. And because the system becomes more stable, urgency starts disappearing. Not completely, just enough to make survival sustainable. That's where the shift happens. You stop thinking in terms of expansion and start thinking in terms of maintenance, protecting the budget, protecting the system you built, protecting the routines that keep things stable. and stability feels good when chaos used to exist. So the structure becomes emotionally important. You don't want to disrupt it. Taking risks starts feeling irresponsible. Spending starts carrying guilt. Even opportunities begin passing through the filter of preservation first. Can this fit the system? Can this be controlled? Can this be justified? That's the trade-off. Budgeting reduces volatility, but it can also reduce movement. Because once your identity becomes tied to managing scarcity well, escaping scarcity starts feeling less familiar than maintaining it. You become attached to control inside the limitation instead of building outside of it. The shift isn't just financial, it becomes psychological.
Every time you successfully absorb pressure, your definition of normal adjusts slightly downward. A smaller margin, less flexibility, more restraint. And because you handled it successfully, the system feels survivable. That's the mechanism. Your ability to adapt changes your expectations faster than your conditions improve. You stop measuring life by freedom and start measuring it by sustainability. Can the bills be covered? Can the month be managed? Can the pressure stay controlled? That becomes the target. And once stability becomes the goal, growth starts feeling risky. Expansion introduces uncertainty. Budgeting reduces it. So your decisions reorganize around minimizing disruption. You avoid moves that threaten the system you built, not because the system is good, because it's stable. And stability creates attachment. Over time, your life becomes optimized around preventing collapse instead of creating leverage. You become highly skilled at compression, delaying purchases, reducing needs, negotiating trade-offs, absorbing inconvenience. And those skills work. That's why the trap is hard to see, because the system genuinely becomes more survivable. But survivable and expandable are not the same thing. The pressure decreases just enough to stop forcing structural change, and once the urgency fades, the conditions stay in place. At first, budgeting feels like it creates more freedom, more awareness, more control. You know where the money goes, you waste less, you become more intentional. But over time, the system starts narrowing around preservation. Every decision gets filtered through sustainability first. Can this fit the budget? Can this be justified? Can this be controlled? That's where the compression starts. You still have options, but fewer of them feel responsible to take. Risk feels heavier. Expansion feels dangerous. Even opportunities start looking like potential instability. So your world reorganizes around maintaining the structure you built, the routines, the limits, the safeguards. And because those systems reduce pressure, they become emotionally difficult to disrupt. You stop thinking about increasing leverage and start thinking about protecting stability. That's the compression. Your life becomes more optimized but less expandable, more controlled but narrower. And the more efficiently you function inside limitation, the easier it becomes to accept limitation as permanent. That's the shift. You didn't escape scarcity, you learned how to operate inside it more efficiently. This is where survival quietly replaces momentum. You thought budgeting would help you escape pressure, but the better you became at surviving it, the longer you stayed inside it.